weekend and it's a nice sunny day, so I was able to cut the grass. It's been quite miserable most of the week. I've been spending a lot of time on this wiring diagram. Each evening I've been coming out and doing it and tweaking it and adjusting it and just trying to get it to look right. This is kind of what I've got. Turn the grid off. And I think I've pretty much got it correct now. What I've done is, this is a booklet available on the New Zealand Riley Library online, part of the Riley Club here, but it's free for anyone to look at, and they're always adding new documentation, which is really good. And one of the ones that turned up fairly recently, I think, was this collection of wiring diagrams for different Rileys, pre-war Rileys all the way up to 1964 Riley Alf. And it's quite interesting looking at these, going through them and seeing how they change over time. They get more and more complicated. So that's 1926. This, I think, would have been the wiring diagram for Brooklands, because they were late 20s, very early 30s, so there isn't much to them. So you can see there, it's got the switch panel. That's the switch panel I have, and not much else. There's a cutout. There's no regulator at all. The dynamo runs as a third brush type system, so you adjust that. As you go on, they get a little bit more complicated. And the interesting thing is, these early diagrams, there are no colors. So I can't turn the pages. You can see that's still pretty simple. Again, that's 1930 Riley 9. You start getting into the later ones, and you can see the complexity just starts increasing as there's more and more stuff there. So you start seeing things like fuses and just more controls, and then eventually you get to about, I think it's this one, sort of 1934, 1935, and you start getting to see what the color codes are. But these pictures are so small, it's actually quite hard to see, so I had to go back to the actual PDF so I could blow it up to actually see what the colors are, because it's got numbers down here and there are tiny little numbers next to the wires. So you can kind of figure out what some of the wiring colors were, but they don't match the more recent sort of standard Lucas wiring colors. Again, here you've got the different wiring colors. So I need to figure out what color scheme I'm going to use. Depends a little bit on what cable I can get, of course. I'm going to keep it pretty simple, so if I can, I'll just use solid colors. Things like the indicators, I think I'll just use a single color. I may get the wire with the stripes, just so you can tell left from right, but to be honest on this, there's a lot of wiring on the diagram here, but when it's actually on the car, it should be relatively easy to figure out which one's the left and which one's the right indicator at the rear, for example. But what I've been doing today is tweaking my diagram, because the first version of it I had, the lines were so close together, I started to try and trace it out and I couldn't even see it properly. So I had to tweak it all. And then I've just gone over it with colored pencils. They don't actually match the color scheme that well. It was more just, I was just using a different color for each different circuit, so I could trace it out and check that my diagram is correct. What I'm hoping is all of this time spent doing this diagram and getting this right means when I actually go to wire the car up, it'll be much easier and faster. And I need this to know how much wire to order, because I have to get it from overseas, of course. So the diagram is laid out more or less where things actually physically go. So obviously this is all the back of the car, this is kind of through the middle, and then the front. So that'll be the next job. Is now I know that this is correct and everything is on here that I want, I can go back to the chassis and start laying out and measuring some of the cable runs and figure out how much I'm going to need to order. And so the different colors here just give me the different amounts of wire and the different lengths, and then when I actually order the cable I'll figure out the colors then. But yeah, the question will be, do I go with the later Lucas style colors, which people are probably a little more familiar with, or I think I'm going to go as close to the 1930s Riley colors as I can, because it's a 1930s Riley. And then of course what I'll do is I'll add that to my wiring diagram. I'll put a little table in here saying what the colors are, and when I actually do the wiring I'm going to get this printed in A3 size probably, or even A2. A3 should be big enough, and then laminate it. And then when you actually do the wiring, what you can do is you can scribble on your laminated diagram, you can cross off the wires, you can actually mark on them with marker pens to show which ones you've actually done as you're doing the wiring. And it's just a really good way to keep it all straight in your head and know what you're actually doing. But that's the plan. So I haven't done anything else on the car apart from this. It really takes a very long time. First to figure out what you want, and then to shuffle everything around to get it so it's in a sensible format that you can actually follow. But I think I'm there now. Taken the front aluminium off, and I've been measuring the car with a tape measure and marking out how much of each wire I need. I'm being fairly generous. I'll see how much it'll cost when I do the order, and if it's not too expensive I'll add a good margin on the amount of wire I think I need. But it ends up working out to be quite a bit. I think once I tally all of this up it'll be quite surprising how much there actually is, even in a very small simple car, because of course you have to take into account, you have to route the wires all the correct ways and out of the way of everything. A couple of wires from the dynamo have to sort of come up and along. I think the wiring will run down along the chassis rails, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a couple of junction boxes. So there'll be one on here which will be basically for the front lights and the grounds, and there'll be another one at the back. I think I'm going to mount that one in there, so it'll be behind the battery. I'll have to make a little bracket that comes off the chassis maybe. I don't want to mount it to the under tray. And that one will be the junction point for the wires going to the back. They'll run along that side underneath the main battery cable, because this side is fuel lines, so I'll keep it all away. And the way I'll do it is it'll be attached to the firewall, but the firewall can stay on the chassis when the body's removed. So the wiring will go through here. The instrument panel is attached to the steering column, so I can take the body off and leave the instrument panel so I don't have to upset any of that wiring. And what I'll do is probably make some little attachment points under this rail in the center, so that when the body is on you can clip the wiring up out of the way there. I'll have to think of something I can use there, just something I can put cable ties or something like that around, or stainless steel wrapping wire, anything like that, and that'll tie the loom up, but it's easily removable, so the body can be taken off and the rest of the wiring and everything be left in place. That's the plan anyway. So there's my diagram. I'll go and start looking at ordering the wire. I think I've shown these before, but these are the sort of lamps I'm going to use. It would be nice to get good period lamps, but they're getting so hard to find now, and any you do get are going to be in crappy condition. You have to restore them, you have to try and find two the same. I've been keeping an eye on Trade Me, of course. That's our local eBay equivalent, and I'm sure the amount of old car stuff is decreasing pretty rapidly. You know, you used to see a lot more things like SU carburetors or vintage car horns and lamps and all sorts of things, but there just doesn't seem to be as much anymore. So these are going to be the front lamps, and these are, they're kind of dual bulb. They've got an indicator and the side lamps. And I did try these out because the wiring on this car is simple. The indicator bulb will come on when the side lamps are on if you're driving at night. And I wanted to see if there's a big enough difference in the color, and it should work. It should be fine. Bearing in mind these didn't have anything at all, so this is an improvement on what they used to have. And then at the back I've got stop lamps, stop and tail, and the number plate lamp and the indicators. So they will be mounted on a small plate that will bolt to the rear of the chassis rail here. So the number plate can go underneath one of these. I'm not sure what the story is with number plates on pointy-tailed cars, because technically you won't be able to see it from one side, but I don't know how that works. There isn't much choice there unless you mount it up on top of the tail somehow, like was it the Speedies? Nippies? One of the Austin 7s did that. So they'll go in there. And I do have a flasher unit that is in the little fuse box, so the lamp should flash. I've got my little indicator switch. So that's another interesting question. Which way do you turn the switch? Because it could be either. You could turn it that way to mean left, or does that way mean you're going right? Because if you imagine it being an arrow, it's pointing to the right. I'll have to sit in it and think what feels more natural. Left like that, right like that, or left like that. Either way, it's easy enough to flip it round, of course. And I believe this has a bulb in it. I can't remember if I'm going to wire it up to make the bulb flash or not. I think it will. So you can see the indicators are on. Because I'm trying to use as many mechanical gauges as possible, there's only a few electrical connections to the back of the instrument panel. There's the ammeter, of course. This is for the fuel pump and the magneto, ignition light, high beam, low beam, and the main switchgear. And the way I'm going to wire that up is off will be the dynamo off. Charge means the field coil's connected, so it'll start charging the battery, and then you've just got side and headlight. This is why I need a separate switch for the high beam, low beam, because originally it didn't have it, it just had light. The lights were just on. The back of the switch is made out of, it's almost like compressed cardboard, so the little sockets in there have moved, so you can't actually plug anything into there, unfortunately. But to deal with that, I did buy, again it's modern, but I will hide it, one of these little units just off AliExpress. These actually screw into that panel, so you can screw these into a metal panel if you want. And there's just a switch, a cigarette lighter socket, and there's actually a little voltmeter built in, so it's got USB sockets, and if you power it up and press that button, it'll tell you the battery voltage, which could be quite useful. So that will have to go in the car somewhere, but hidden. I don't want that in the instrument panel. I want it tucked away somewhere so that it's there, but it doesn't look too modern. I think that's really about it. So I need to get back on the body. I've been putting it off, but it's coming along. The paper helps me see where I need the shape. So obviously this is just flat, the paper, because you can't give it compound curve, so it's flat in the middle, but it gives you some idea of the outer pattern of it. This will be for the boot lid, so I'll do that last anyway. I just wanted to see if the rest of the body looked sensible with that hole covered up. So this needs just a little bit more. You can see how I'm quite rough with it to get enough shape in it, so I end up with a few tracking marks I need to file out. But it's more or less the right shape. So I'll start doing the sides next, I guess. And I need to finish dressing the weld on this one, but I don't want to do that on the car because it'll just get covered in aluminium dust. So I need to wait until I've done the tail, and then I can take this frame off and do it all on the frame. That will be the plan there. And I was just going to make an adjustment to these straps that hold the fuel tank. They're a bit too long, so I'm going to trim those down and make those straps a little bit neater. Not that anyone will ever see that. It's Sunday and I'm not bashing metal. I'm out in my lab. It's been raining, but it looks like the sun's coming out. And I am still working on the wiring diagram. I do now have the actual diagram completed. This is it here. There have been a few small tweaks. One thing I did do is, based on some advice that you can find online, a chap called Dr. Hugo Holden is his name. He's done a lot of research into how the RB106 regulators work, and he talks about it in one of his documents about swapping the A and the A1 terminals. So those terminals are the two terminals that supply power and connect to the battery. And the reason there are two of them is because there's a slightly different profile of how the voltage drops from the regulator depending on the current drawn from the terminal. And his suggestion is you basically connect the battery to the A1 terminal and the accessories to the A terminal, which is the opposite of how they did it back in the day. He'll go into all the reasons for that. It sort of seems to make sense, and it's easy enough to swap them around if you need to. I haven't decided to use purple for all the colors. What I've ended up doing is, based on this drawing, I have created a spreadsheet. Being a computer geek programmer, I love spreadsheets. They're great fun. So I created the spreadsheet and have gone through every single wire that's in the car. I was marking them off with the purple colored pencil as I went to know I got them all. And basically I've built a spreadsheet that shows me exactly what the connections are, exactly the length I require, what the terminations on the end of the wire are, what the color is, and the total lengths. My little spreadsheet, I've got a column here which is the different number of different colored wires I'm going to need. There's 15 of those. I actually have a little check conditional formatting thing in here so that every time I added a color here, it would remind me to add it to this column as well to keep track of it all. And based on this, there's about 51 different connections. There will be a few other little tiny short connections between fuses and relays and things, but I didn't count those. 15 different colors of wire, and in total about 117 meters of wire needed just for one little car. That is assuming I run earth wires to all of the lamps. I may not do that. I may earth them to the chassis, but it doesn't hurt to have all of that extra black earth wire, because I can use that later on if I need to add any other things. Now the colors get interesting. I mentioned this book that you can get from the New Zealand Riley Club online library, free for anyone, and it's got all the different wiring diagrams. The very early ones, the sort of 20s ones, they don't really show the colors, and anyone who's done 50s or 60s British cars will know that there's a fairly standard color code, the Lucas color codes. But it looks like in the 30s they were they were not consistent. So I've just kind of picked the best colors I could think of that seemed to make the most sense, and I haven't worried too much about completely separating the colors. So I've kind of tried to keep it fairly consistent, because there are few enough wires that you can sort of tell what the wire is based on where it's going, if that makes sense. So for the high beam, for example, I can use the same color wires in most places rather than needing wires with traces, because there's only going to be one blue wire going to the switchboard, for example. So that made it a little bit easier. And I'm going to order the cable next, and I'm going to get everything through, what are they called? autoelectricalsupplies.co.uk. They'll ship overseas. They have all of the things I need, and they have the proper vintage braided style cable. I should be able to use the 1mm square cable for most things. That's good for up to 8.75 amps, and slightly thicker cable for the main power connections through the ammeter and that sort of thing. But that's the next job, is put together that order. Yeah, I think that's it for now. Before making my order, I did a second double check of my wiring, went over it all again, which was a good thing because I found I'd missed a couple. So I added those in, and I had to tweak the color codes a little bit just based on what cable is actually available. But I've made my order now. I ordered a whole bunch of other little bits and pieces as well. They've got all sorts of interesting stuff on their website. You know, all sorts of just electrical stuff. I spent about an hour just going through the website. So I bought some little fuse holder relay modules that you can stack together. I might end up using those to do the actual fuses and relays and hide those under an aluminium cover. I can't remember what else I got. Oh, one thing was a stop light for the Velocette. They had the replica Miller type lights, so since they had them and I have to pay for shipping, I grabbed one. The price of the cable isn't too bad. It was only about £1 per meter, so $2 New Zealand a meter. I think the whole order came to about £360 plus £100 for shipping, and that's always the problem I have, is just the cost of the postage is ridiculous. But there's no other choice, so it's done. The good thing is they use DHL for the shipping, so that should be pretty quick, hopefully. But all this stuff now can go into a little folder, and it'll all get kept with the car, of course. And I think I mentioned what I'll do when I actually do the wiring is I'll get this printed out twice the size on A3 and laminate it, and then you use that as your guide when you're actually doing the wiring it all up. Oh, one of the other things I bought was a sort of connector kit, so it's got spade terminals and bullet connectors and things like that, which would be quite handy. So all I have to do is wait for that, and now I need to go back to the aluminium bodywork, I guess. My Riley wiring parts order is all done. I thought I'd come into Big Shed and have a bit of a clean up because it's become a mess and there's leaves blown in and crap all over the floor and grass everywhere. So I was just having a bit of a tidying up some of my Riley stuff and putting things away, and I discovered 2 original Lucas terminal boxes. Of course, I've just ordered 2, they'll be replicas, but these are original ones, so I've got them in the ultrasonic cleaner being tidied up, so that was a good find. And just generally poking around, and I came across these, which I was genuinely surprised to find that I had, because I don't remember having these at all. What these actually are the pannier bag holders for the Velocette. So that's what goes on there. I suppose I knew I had them, but they'd completely slipped my mind. So they're a little bit beaten up, but nothing that can't be repaired. I think there's a bit of a hole in that one. So I might give these a quick bash with the hammer just to try and get them a bit straighter and see how bad they really are. But I'll need to clean those up. I need to give the body another go over with the metal bright, just to get the surface rust off it. You can see all the phosphate coating. Where the white stuff is, it isn't rusting. But I need to go over that again. What else am I doing? I think that's it. I'm just tidying up. I'm putting off the metalwork again. So I need to get back into the habit of coming out after work each day and just doing a little bit on it. That's the only way I'm going to progress it, I think. Everything's clean and tidy now. Since I'm spending lots of money overseas, I'm going to order a few more nuts and bolts and things that I need, mainly the ones that bolt down the frame to the chassis, and some of the mountings for guards and things like that. I still don't know exactly all of the bolts I need. I'm getting pretty close now though, I think. So I've got a little stock here, but never have the ones I actually need. So I'll do a smallish order to keep the postage down, see how that goes. Speaking of spending money, I know I said I got rid of the Landy because I didn't want another project. That's why I got the little Fiesta, but I can't just leave it stock. So I am doing a few minor tweaks to it. The first one is I'm fitting lowering springs. So I ended up having to buy these spring compressors because yeah, most of my cars are on leaf springs. So I had to buy these for the coils. The springs haven't arrived yet, but they'll drop the car. I think it's 30 or 40 millimeters. It's not much. And I'm also getting better wheels and tires for it. That's probably all I'll do to it. I don't think there's much more I can do to it. It will need its sort of 10-year, I can't remember the actual mileage service, so it probably needs the timing belt doing and the water pump and things like that. But I'm just going to pay someone to do that. I can't be bothered with it on the modern cars. And then it should all be nice and good. And I also spent some time with the hammer and dolly fixing these up, the panniers, and they've come out reasonably well. This whole piece was sort of caved in, so I had to reform that corner. There is a hole there that will need welding up, and I need to strip the paint off these, and then I can repair them properly and then repaint them. But they've come up reasonably well. I think they should be fine once they're cleaned up and painted. And I'm going to go and do my order for nuts and bolts. Just a little note there of what I need. And I think that might almost be it for the weekend. The sun's come out, so it's a bit finer out there again. Oh, the other thing I've been working on. I knew there was something else. I did repurpose an old netbook and a really old monitor because it's square, but so I can sit out here and play with Meccano and watch YouTube videos. But I've been playing with the gramophone. It's just hand cranked at the moment, so that works. And I've been working on the sound box and I guess you'd call it a tone arm. I'm not sure what it's actually called. I just found some little bits of copper tubing I had in my scrap bins, and sort of filed a slot in one, sort of soldered things together, drilled and tapped it for a little screw. So that'll make the piece that this pivots on. This will sit here. What I want to do is get a copper T-piece, and I'll mount that on there, and I'll use that to mount it to the Meccano, and then I just have to build the horn. It does work reasonably well. You can hold this by hand. Sounds horrible, like truly horrendous, but it does work. And if I get it working by hand, then I can have a look at how I'm going to motorize it. Clockwork motors, the Meccano ones, I don't think would run for long enough. That's okay though, because I don't think you'd listen to it for very long. And making the sort of horn is going to be interesting to try and get that gramophone horn shape, because it's a very distinctive shape. You want to, you know, that's the thing that really says gramophone, I guess. So that's something that'll be interesting. I may be able to use these. Meccano everywhere. These little angle plates, which I'm never really sure what these are for. People build little cars out of them, I guess, but I think I've got enough of those to do a full circle with them. But it's going to take some interesting manipulation and bending of the pieces to get that nice sort of curve. That'll be interesting when I get to it. So motivation for most things has been a little bit low lately. We've got a lot going on at work. I think the government here seems to have got public enemy number one confused with public servants, and a lot of people are losing their jobs at the moment. Luckily I'm not impacted, but a lot of people around us are, so it's been a really horrible time the last couple of months, and we're just kind of recovering now. Other minor things, I did trim down these wooden blocks that are that go on the fuel tank. They're mainly there so that the straps don't crush the seam at the back, and that has made a big difference. They're a lot tighter now, and I had to use shorter bolts, which was good, but they're not even done up fully tight, and that's pretty solid. For those of you following the gourds, these are pretty much dry now, but they still need sort of scrubbing to get all that mold and stuff off them, which is where the sink will come in handy. And this is working really well. My water drains out through there. These are those little Lucas junction boxes that I found that I've put through the ultrasonic to give them a clean up. So I'm going to give them a scrub with hot soapy water. This one's missing all the little screws, but I'm sure I can find some of those. But these should clean up quite nicely. This one's a bit covered in paint. So oiling the jug there. I did test that this is a metal sink, but it is all earth. The whole shed is metal, so it's all earth, which is good. So yeah, I guess get motivated again on the bodywork. I did end up doing one last thing today. I did make an order of nuts and bolts, because I want to be able to bolt the body down to the chassis with the proper hardware. I've bought stuff in the past. It's just getting harder and harder to find this stuff, these nuts and bolts, in the sort of BSF sizes, which is what these cars were built with. I've used Thomas Smith fasteners in the UK before. They were really good, but it looks like their range of stuff is now getting quite limited. A lot of the sizes I wanted just aren't available. The other one that's commonly used is Namric, and they're very good as well. But they have a warning on their website now saying that the manufacturers in the UK aren't making BSF hardware anymore. So it's getting harder to get, and it's getting more expensive as it gets harder to get. So I think I just spent another, I can't remember how much it came to. It was probably like 400 New Zealand dollars for a handful of nuts and bolts. I think all up today I've spent over 1,000 New Zealand dollars on just wiring and hardware. And this stuff is just getting harder and harder to find and more expensive. So I'm not sure I'd do another vintage car after this. It's just getting too hard. It's just getting too costly. And it really annoys me when you get the vintage car clubs and people saying they need to get more young people involved in this hobby. They can't afford it. I can afford it because I'm older and, you know, I've got disposable income. But there's no way a young person could afford this sort of stuff. It's just ridiculous when you have to import everything, so you're also paying the shipping costs, but just the cost of the parts is going through the roof. But I do want this one to be right, so I think for this it's worth doing it properly and get it finished, get it nice and get the right hardware in it. So I think it was worth doing that order. Hopefully they don't take too long to show up. They don't normally. It's normally pretty quick.